Hello and welcome to another episode of Virtual Coffee with Ashish. For people who are coming in for the first time, I hope you're here for continuous monitoring for security controls and vulnerabilities. Pretty sure put security in there. The episode gets live on the podcast, which is that ticker, which is you can see at the bottom. Today's topic is really interesting because I have floated around with continuous monitoring for some time, and I always think of this concept that sounds really complicated. When you think about like a really large cloud environment, you kind of think, or even a large environment period, you still kind of feel that where is this? Like, how complicated is this? Where do I start? So I've got an OG of the internet world with me to kind of talk about this. So I'm gonna bring him on. But before I do, for people who are joining in for the first time, this is a cloud security podcast show, which is where we talk about everything about cloud. We cover topics like threat intelligence, cloud security, infrastructure security in cloud, application security, you name it. If you think of cloud and there's a security topic on it, we probably talk about it. That's the website if you guys want to go. Now, without further ado, let me bring Daniel. Hey, Daniel. Welcome to the show.
Going?
Good. Welcome to the show. For people who are watching in, by the way, we've got comments coming in already. So you should see the comments on your screen as well as they come up. There's a comments tab for it. So otherwise, I'm happy to kind of call out the questions. Morning to Vineet. For people who are joining in on LinkedIn or YouTube, feel free to hit that like button because we kind of need to show some Daniel some love. I'm going to ask, I know this could be, I can have a whole episode about where you started and everything, but I'm sure the audience is keen to know first of all, who's Daniel and how did you get into cybersecurity?
So I got into cybersecurity when I was in university, and there were a whole lot of worms going around at the time that were just self-propagating. They were taking over the whole internet. This was around the 2000 timeframe. And the university computers just started falling. And I basically just started helping because I had just learned how to use Linux a while before. And I basically just went around installing Linux on everything. And then I basically got deputized as you need to do this for the whole university. And then I just became in charge of security for the university.
Oh, wow. That's an interesting start, man. And I think worthwhile calling out, do you see worms even now? Or is that a concept back in the day? I don't know. I haven't heard of a worm in some time. So I wonder
It's been a while. It's been a while. Yeah.
Yeah. Because for people who probably haven't heard of it, I'll definitely encourage people to Google it. This is kind of where a lot of us may have started our careers, where talking about worms instead of viruses to go about. I've got a couple of questions and I've got a few people coming in as well. So I'll do encourage them to kind of come in and ask you more questions. But we're here for continuous monitoring. Now, when someone Googles or when people try to talk about automation and they all go into continuous auditing, continuous compliance, can you demystify what is continuous monitoring for people who may not have heard of it? Is it the same as continuous auditing or compliance?
The way I like to abstract that is to imagine questions. So questions you wish you knew the answers to. So if you're a CISO at some company, some medium-sized company or whatever, the questions you might want to know are, do I have any dangerous data ports open that are facing the internet right now? And let's say it's a larger company. Let's say it's medium-sized or larger, and you've got lots of regular legacy IP space. And you've also got a big cloud presence, and you've got a bunch of developers who are trying to implement stuff. So they're going and turning things on. Plus you have this big legacy IP space with lots of, IPs there. And again, you've got developers who can go and turn up services. And most companies don't have perfect visibility or knowledge of what's being enabled. Mm-hmm. So the question is, what do I have exposed right now? And when I read the newspaper and I hear about, a newspaper. No one's reading a newspaper anymore.
I was going to say,
you're reading the news from wherever, and you're hearing about these compromises. You're hearing about Postgres servers being taken over, NoSQL servers, just all sorts of misconfigurations online, and you're seeing that's how they got hacked, right? You look at Capital One, lots of lots of situations there, and the news is full of them basically every week. And you find out it's like an own goal. It's their fault essentially because this happened. So that would be one question. Do I have any of these exposed to the internet? Another question would be, do I have stuff that's about to expire, TLS wise, like certificates that are about to expire? So you make this giant list of bad things that you're worried about happening to you. You turn that into a question. And that set of questions is essentially what you would do continuously. So at that moment, you could ask yourself a philosophical question. Okay, are you monitoring for that? Are you auditing for that? That's just semantics. All you're doing is you're answering these questions that you're worried about. Say, whatever it is, your top 20 questions that you're concerned about. And you find a way to ask those questions as often as possible and let yourself know if any of those answers are yes.
Oh, and to your point, that's your, I guess, that could feed into your SOC if you want to do that part where, suddenly I've got publicly exposed APIs. Exactly. I probably want someone to respond to it. So it's not like that you're constantly trying to write a custom script to find out at any given point in time, is this exposed right now? But you kind of do it once and you just wait for it to kind of trigger an alarm and you kind of go down that path. Sweet. So, but it's continuous auditing, continuous compliance, continuous monitoring sounds like a very large organization kind of a thing. Is that, I mean, like, do smaller organizations need to think about it as well, or is it an easier building block? What are your thoughts on that?
They definitely need to think about it, and I think the conversation is starting to happen at smaller organizations. The bug bounty space is really pioneering this right now. So myself and a few others have been doing this for a few years, but now it's really starting to blossom inside of the bug bounty community. And that body of knowledge that's available there is available to anyone. So if someone just has a security mind and they have a 10-person company and they're all AWS, they could take some of these lessons from the bug bounty community. And there are a number of guides out there. There are platforms out there, free open source code snippets, like you could roll your own. There's just tons of options out there for somebody in a 10-person company. It could be the co-founder of the company. Could go, and most importantly, what are the worst things I'm worried about happening? Turn that into questions. And then you just go and code up a solution that corresponds to each one. So that could be the co-founder of a 2-person company.
Yeah.
That could be a medium-sized company, or it could be a giant enterprise.
Wait, and because I've got some folks who may not know what bug bounty is. So how do you describe bug bounty to someone who's probably new in the cybersecurity field?
Yeah, so bug bounty is it's basically a response to the world of pen testing, where you would, as a company, you would hire someone to come find vulnerabilities for you. So you would bring in whatever, 1 or 2 people, or if it's a really big engagement, it would be multiple people. And they would look around on the network, inside and outside, or whatever the scope was, and try to find vulnerabilities. And then they would submit that in as a report. And that works great. But this idea was basically, what if the internet could help? What if you could basically announce that you wanted help looking at your security, and you open up a program and everyone on planet Earth could find vulnerabilities, send them to you, and you would reward them with money based on the quality of the bug. So it's crowdsourcing pen testing.
And I love the field myself. Worthwhile calling out their public and private ones as well in that space. So just be wary of who you attack. You don't probably want to find out they have a bug bounty program before you start attacking these people. But just peeling another layer to the bug bounty. By the way, I just realized, sorry, when you take take the drink, cheers. Sorry.
Oh yeah, cheers. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm doing Topo Chico.
Oh, nice. What'd you get? Topo Chico is like a beer?
No, it's sparkling water, twist and lime. Yeah.
Oh, nice. I need to try those one of those. By the way, thanks so much. I totally forgot. I got so excited to talk to you. Like, let's go into this question straight away. So I'm going to peel a layer for the bug bounty program. And you mentioned that there are quite a few resources that are opening up. So are these being written by folks who are bug bounty, I guess, professional bug bounty folks, or by the blue team, red team? And you can see my hint because I think you have a blog about this, which I love. You have a purple team, red team, a blue team.
Hmm.
And I find it really interesting the way you explained it. But from a bug bounty resourcing perspective, you mentioned it's available for anyone. Is like, I just need to sit on Google and go, what am I searching for? Continuous monitoring guides?
Yeah, so I would say continuous monitoring is kind of a newcomer to the bug bounty space.
Yeah.
Bug bounty traditionally has been an individual, a collection of individuals, but the security researcher themselves would do their own personal brand of testing. So oftentimes they have a specialty, like maybe they're really good at cross-site scripting, or maybe they're really good at RFI, or whatever it is that they do.
Yep.
Oftentimes they would just kind of like be really good at that. And then for all of the surface area that they were attacking and all the different companies that they were doing bounties for, they would go and like do that one move, right? It's like almost like martial arts where like you get good at one thing and then you go to
Yep.
tournaments and you see if anyone could block that one thing. And it makes people a lot of money. So it's been very manually focused in the past. It was people just going and trying this thing in not really a repeatable way. But
Right.
within the last few years, like I said, myself and a number of other bounty people basically started saying, hey, wait a minute, if I'm doing this one move and it's really effective, can I just automate that move? And then automate also the discovery of new targets, of course, within the boundaries of the bounty program.
Yep.
But they could just set it off running and then go to the grocery store or go on vacation. And this is what I actually built a company around this in the past, which I'm no longer affiliated with. But these frameworks exist where you basically set and forget, and you hook that up to alerting. So
Right.
you go on vacation, you go to the grocery store, you go to the park, you go for a walk, and suddenly you get a Slack message that says, hey, I found a new subdomain within the scope of this program, and it has a vulnerable file at the root of its directory structure. And that of course could spawn another automated thing, like go and exploit it or whatever. So
Yep.
you could come back from vacation, have a bunch of bugs, you write them up and submit them, and you just made a ton of money.
Oh, you're giving ideas, man. You're giving a lot of ideas over here.
So the crazy part about this is that the flip side of this is you could do the exact same thing as the defender. Okay.
Oh,
So if you're the blue team, if you're the CISO or you're some security engineer at the company, you could have this same exact infrastructure running constantly so that the infrastructure running against you from either an attacker or a bug bounty person, they're not going to see it first because you're also running it. So now it's a race to who finds it first and goes and fixes it.
oh, I love, but and to your point, a blue team person would have access to some of these guides which are there on the internet to plan for it. So you don't have to think of all the ideas, like all the questions. I guess there are already questions available on the internet. Is that right?
Yeah. So, I mean, if you were to just search for how do I get started in bounty, you're going to
Yeah.
find 1,000 results. And a lot of those are written by people that I know, and they're just really well done. Plus, the community is really open arms, right? There are
Hmm.
so many people in the community who will be like, "Oh, I did this video on YouTube. You should check this out. This is where you start." They're really good with sharing information. You can just ping them and just be like, "Hey, look, I got this new technique. What do you think?" And a bunch of people will show up and say, "Oh yeah, I do something like that. You should try this or whatever." It's just a very open community, and
Yeah.
it's pretty easy to get into.
That's pretty awesome. And I've got a couple of questions, I think, in this space. But for people who are joining in now, we're talking about continuous monitoring. Feel free to drop your questions into the comment section, as well as hit the like button if you like this, I guess. A couple of questions have come through. Are you using Python for automation? Or you have a
Yeah,
favorite language?
yeah. So lot of Python. A lot of the infrastructure actually Bash Bash is surprisingly powerful. It's
I
been
did
my
not think you would
go-to.
say that, but I'm
Oh
glad you
yeah,
did. I don't feel alone anymore.
no, it's surprisingly powerful. I would say Bash, Python, and I'm lately moving a decent amount towards Go.
Oh, okay. Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Golang.
yeah. Golang is really powerful. It does parallel requests really well. It's
Oh,
like
you can do
C,
multi-threading with.
yeah. It's like C speed almost. So it's got advantages over Python and Bash in that way. So I like to use Bash as glue, and then use Python and Go, and also just a lot of other tools that are already written in these languages. So there are a number of I could share stuff afterwards if you want to put it in
Yep.
show
Yep.
notes. But I
100%.
yeah, there's tons of great creators who are writing tools. I put out a number of tools myself, and again, it's easy to collect this stuff together,
Yeah.
stitch it together using Bash or whatever, and just be on your way.
Uh, that's an interesting one. Now, maybe it's a good segue into the next question that came in from Rahul around any tips or awareness on managing risk around bounty programs. Interesting question. Keen to know because you, I guess, obviously do a lot of bounty. What's the advice that you're giving to the others to the blue team for all this that they're finding?
So that is a really good question. There is a risk to just opening up the gates of a bounty program. If you just say, "Hey, send me everything," there's a really big problem. People can sort of run scanners, right?
Mm.
Just run a like Nikto or something like that.
Or even a burp suite scanner, I imagine.
Yeah, Burp, like lots of different tools out there that you could run, and it just produces reports. And they just start emailing you these giant zip files and PDFs, and it's like a 900-page PDF or whatever. And you're like, okay, what is the actual bug, and what did it allow you to do? So imagine you're the only security engineer. Someone had the bright idea to open a bug bounty, and now you come in and you got an inbox full of 700 items, and you don't know which ones are good bugs and which ones are bad. So it ends up putting a big burden on the receiving team of like, how am I going to triage these? And then also, how am I going to do remediation? Like you have to have a plan. And there's a bunch of companies out there that are really good at this. I mean, yeah, BugCrowd, HackerOne, those are the top two bounty platforms. And they now understand that this is a thing. And that's why they have services which are which do the triaging for the company, right?
Yeah.
But if you're a bounty expert yourself and you can get a team together to do triage, it's possible for the company to do themselves, and a lot of people do that. But you don't want to skip that step and be surprised and get overwhelmed.
Yeah, okay, fair. That's a good way. Kind of manage your risk by being aware that there's a lot of work depending on how much you open up to the bug bounty program as well. So probably start small, I guess. Is that what your advice would be?
Start small and be ready to do triage. Have a solution for triage.
Oh, but great response. I've got just one. I think it's more of a comment saying recently a bunch of people found CVE in Apple iCloud, and Apple rewarded them 100K. That's an insane amount. I wonder. Wow, yeah, I guess, but it's normal for bug bounty programs to get if you found a really good bug.
Yeah, so there are, I would say, hundreds of bug bounty programs out there, probably thousands of bounty programs out there.
Oh, outside
So,
of HackerOne and Bug Bounty, sorry, BugCrowd.
no, I'm saying if you go to those platforms and you search
right,
for
right.
who is running a program,
Yeah.
and you can see how much they're offering, and absolutely, I mean, you could make a lot of money doing this. And a lot of the people I know in the space, they have transitioned and they do this full time now. They quit their regular jobs, and this is all they do is bounties.
And to your point, you can automate it. So when you're on vacation, there's continuous monitoring happening for your, I was going to call your KO move, I guess, whatever their KO move may be. Just that signature just keeps going around everywhere.
Well, yeah. And let me expand on that. So
Yep.
basically, the best people, the people at the top of these leaderboards, I would say I probably know, I don't know, I don't know, 60, 80% of them.
Right.
And I could tell you all of them have this thing that I have and this thing that I'm talking about. This continuous monitoring, they have it. And the crazy thing about that KO move is, let's say that they had whatever, 2 or 3 finishing moves that they would go around and make money with 3 years ago. Well, they've already built that into their automation. But now the crazy thing about this automation is they could hear about another finishing move, just go and read about it and say, oh, that's a great idea. And then they pull it over, put it into their automation, and now they're finding something new. I'll give you a good example. There's a framework that finds favicons. You know, the favicon in the
Yes.
browser?
Yes,
Yeah.
that's right.
Well, so a big part of the bounty thing is like, how do you know if you scan 10,000 websites for a giant IP space, which ones are related to this brand? If you're trying to only hit that brand, but there's no explicit indication on the website whether or not it's associated with the brand. Well, what this project does is it takes hashes of the favicons and groups them all together and says, if they're running a favicon for so-and-so Acme company, it might be Acme.
Oh.
Well, so that's a technique which you now put into your continuous monitoring.
Yeah.
And now you say, I've found a new website, a new attack surface that is likely to be associated with this brand. And it could be that you found it first, which means it's full of vulnerabilities. So now you're going to make a ton of money.
Daniel, you have spilled a lot of nuggets in there already. So I wonder if all the people are going to drop off and start Googling for how do I enter a bug bounty program as a side hustle and then make it a full-time gig.
Well, and to your point about the topic of this show, these are all techniques you should be doing as a defender. Because you can get there first. You have more inside knowledge of all the vulnerabilities. You have more inside knowledge of the space.
Yeah.
So it's a big deal.
I think so. And I 100% agree with you, because I think I believe the reason the blue team, a lot of people talk about why the blue team is not sometimes keeping up with the red team or the purple team or whoever you want to call it. I find it really interesting because sometimes the answers are out there, and to your point, there are playbooks out there that the bug bounty you guys use, and they probably openly talk about it as well. It's just about having someone spend the time to go, is this worthwhile? Does it make sense for my environment? So I've got one more comment coming in. Sam Curry and his team would be awarded around $500K for finding around 55 vulnerabilities. That's insane. Clearly, this is like a very popular topic as well. I've actually got an interesting question. What suggestions do you have for continuous monitoring in a multi-cloud environment? And maybe I can twist it around a bit, and you can. Does it really matter if it's in a continuous monitoring state, like to your point about KO move? If it's multi-cloud, single cloud, data center, like what are your suggestions for this?
Yeah, it does actually matter. So here's the situation where you have to watch out for. So let's say you have a main IT department in a medium-sized company, but let's say it's multinational, right? You've got like something in France, you have you're in India, and you're also in Chicago, right? And just based on the politics of how the company came up, the main IT place is in, say, France.
Right.
And you're a security engineer in France, and you're like, oh, I have to cover the entire cloud. So you go and get the 7 AWS accounts in France, and you rig it all up, and you see tens of thousands of IPs, and you're monitoring, and that's fine. Little do you know, there are 2 other AWS accounts in Chicago and in India. But you're not friends with them. They're not telling you. And you wake up one day because your boss calls you and you're on the front page of whatever TechCrunch because your company got compromised because someone had a Postgres server out there and a whole bunch of data got pulled. Turns out it was a listener running from AWS infrastructure that was run by an account out of Chicago. if you don't know about the accounts, you can't continuously monitor them. So what you have to do with continuous monitoring is make sure you have all the ins to know when new infrastructure is being spun up, that you know all the AWS accounts, and that you're not just getting a tiny slice of it.
Oh, that's a great point though, because I mean, I guess people keep saying this, you can't protect what you don't see.
Yeah.
So is there like, have you had to come across the exercise yourself where you kind of had to do some form of discovery? Because I imagine it's not easy to find out if, like, to your point, I don't communicate with my team in France, but how do I? So I guess step one, talk to your team members, I guess.
Talk to your team members, but also think. So the most important thing for this whole space is think like the attacker, right? So if there are techniques that an attacker can use to find the other infrastructure that you don't know about, figure out what those are and use them as well. So for example, the favicon thing would work because all three have to use the same favicons for their, potentially, most likely, not always, but all three companies might be using the same favicon. So if you have a way to look at attack surface and link it to the company, go and do that. And now you find a whole new website. Turns out there's some crazy marketing department and they had this crazy idea. That's the other thing. Marketing is a huge attack surface generator, because they can have an idea, they have money behind them, and they'll just hire a third party and just be like, hey, go stand up this website. Here's the code. Here's the favicon. And within 2 weeks, they have a website. Did they go through security? Nope. Did they call you? Nope.
Oh, and to your point, because they're the ones who are bringing in, helping sales happen, security has sometimes little to no say. But I'm not gonna go into that because it's a really interesting space in there where a lot of security people are like, but it doesn't make sense. I've got a few people who loved the favicon idea. One more question here, might sound buzzwordy, but have you considered or added any machine learning algorithms to your methodology, to your KO move? I'm going to start calling it KO move now because it sounds so much cool.
Yeah. So that is a fantastic question. And I'm not doing it yet, but I am deeply interested in this space. There's a lot of thought around this. In fact, I know I have some contacts in the Pentagon, and this is something that we've talked about as well. It's like, so in the ML world, there's an idea of NESS, NESS. So there's like vulnerableness. There's like catness. Like how catty is this image? And like the catness is 89%. That means it might be a cat, right?
Okay. Yep.
So the idea is you're dumping tons of data, which is constantly being collected, into an algorithm that tells you potentially that this website looks vulnerable. And of course, you have to train it. This is supervised learning. You have to train it so it knows what bad looks like and what good looks like. But doing that, now you could be scanning much larger areas, dumping that into the algorithm. And instead of just saying, hey, a port opened up, it could say a port opened up and its vulnerableness score is a 94%.
Oh.
So now if you had tons of findings, you would have prioritization using the ML that says, here's where you should go first, because it's most likely to pay you money.
Interesting. So to your point, because you have your KO signature move running on a lot of domains, I guess hundreds of thousands of domains across Bugcrowd or HackerOne, but not all of them. Some of them may be false positive as well, where you go, really? But I mean, to your point, requires some triage. But if you have machine learning on top of it to prioritize, this has a very high percentage of being accurate.
Yes, exactly.
Oh, wow.
Or a very high percentage of being a false positive. And it gets really crazy when you're defending a big company. What if you're defending a city or a state or a country?
So
you have a very small military group, cyber military or whatever. And it's like, okay, I have 75 million open Postgres servers. Which ones do I need to defend first? And that's racing with the algorithms on the other side because they're doing something similar to find the ones to attack first.
Oh,
So it's this escalation of not only the monitoring, but the algorithms giving you the prioritization of what to focus on first.
that is insane. And it's like, I wish the podcast people could see this, but I'm like, poof, mind blown. Like, and this is kind of where, to your point about when you're talking about a small team, I'm not going to call it Pentagon in case we start recording this conversation. I'm just going to say, if you're defending a city or a country, when people talk about nation state, it's that's next level stuff, man. It's like you're almost trying to. I don't know how they don't have anxiety. I'm just saying I don't know how they have a normal life if you're in that space.
Well, and that's why I really love the ML question, because that is a way potentially, again, this is all fraught with difficulty, but it is a way to go from, you have a team of whatever, 11,
Yeah.
and you're looking at 11 million results. How do you get to the top 10? How do you focus on the most important things? And the thing about ML that's super exciting is here's a really great example. If you look at the sky and you're looking at meteors coming in,
Yeah.
Most of that coverage is done by amateurs with a telescope.
Really?
Like, yes, so much of that coverage is done by amateurs, and they're sending it into places and saying, "Hey, did you see this one?" And they're like, "Hold on, let me look." They're like, "Oh yeah, good catch. Yeah, we'll monitor that one. Thanks." Really? So what you really need is you need eyes, you need sensors facing the stars,
Yeah.
combined with algorithms, because they don't sleep, they don't get tired, they just keep watching, and they could report to you which ones might be asteroids. And this is the advantage of ML, is that it scales and it doesn't get tired. And it's the same exact thing for monitoring a country or a giant company or your company, a medium-sized company. It's like, can we use that to continuously monitor and also to continuously prioritize?
That's pretty awesome. And I think to your point, the blue team is also adopting machine learning quite a bit as well. I think because I know the guys in Netflix, I was talking to them a couple of years ago. A couple of years ago, they had already started hiring for machine learning folks in the security team. So to your point, even when a SOC team is managing so much data coming through your SIEM or whatever, how do you prioritize? How do you go? Like I have this bane with the SOC team. I've got a SOC team myself that reports to me, but I find this really interesting that in the 21st century we still have to let people go through false positives and go, oh, this is a false positive, it's a false positive, it's a false positive, and you're like, why is someone spending time just triaging these things when, to your point, there's machine learning, there's other things available to, if would you rather spend time there and just help something else prioritize out of 11 million incidents or reports that you've had? I love the idea, man. So you're still exploring this.
Yeah, I'm exploring exactly how to implement it. The problem with ML is always training, and it's always how good
you
is
need a
the
lot of
training.
data to train it as well.
You need a lot of data. You need good data because
yes,
because if you label something as false positive, and it looks too similar to something else, like you're just going to get a lot of noise, right? And one interesting thing about this is there's already, you're probably aware of this if you're running a SOC. There's already lots of AI conversation around logs and SOCs.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, every vendor out there is talking about machine learning and AI. Yeah.
Exactly. And they're going to prioritize this and prioritize that.
Yep.
This is the extension of that. This is the extension of, okay, that's for all the logs that came into the central place. But now, what are the questions we're actually worried about? And let's go constantly surveil, constantly blanket, looking for problems, and bring that into the algorithm. That's where this continuous monitoring is a step above just log collection.
Oh, that's an interesting point, and it's probably a good point to mention. Another comment that came from Vineet was about, because we talked about inventory and obviously maintaining inventory for resources. I feel that's hard to begin with. Is there and this is kind of going to your point about how do you scale this? Like, you make, is this one of those things where you take one step at a time, or just make a playbook, keep applying it? Because I think you mentioned some of this in your talk as well. What are your thoughts on that?
So start with your list of questions, right? Start with your list of concerns first, then your list of questions. The list of questions that you're asking yourself, like to Vineet's point, how many externally facing hosts do I have? That's a question. That's a question you want the answer to perpetually, always, at any moment you want to know. The answer is 9,437, right? And you know exactly what ports, what services, next question, what services are available to the internet on those hosts? You have the answer to that. Okay, are any of them running a web server? You have the answer to that. So that is the centerpiece of that question, or the answer to that question. And Vineet is 100% correct. That is a foundation for an asset management system, which has been a massive Achilles heel for all of IT since IT started.
Yep.
And to your earlier point, you can't defend what you don't understand. So half of these hacks, or some massive percentage of these hacks, are on infrastructure they didn't know they had. Like the CISO wakes up and it's like, I thought we turned that off 4 years ago. And here we are in the news, in TechCrunch because of that.
Yep. And I love it. I think I was talking to someone, I can't remember the name of the company anymore. I don't think I can talk about the company as well, but the incident was an interesting one. They had a bug bounty program, kind of like what we have as well. Because I was trying to, we have a bug bounty program in my company, and I was trying to find out information about, like, what are the kind of risks, or what are the kind of findings which have been interesting. One of the findings that someone spoke about was that there was a service which people thought they had turned off years ago, and someone in a bug bounty program found it. And you're like, this was supposed to be like, exactly to what you said. The size was like, what the hell? We had a closing party for this thing. There was like 50 people there. This all said this is closed, no longer. We moved on, and some kid around the world found it. And you're like, yep, this is the reality. Yeah, man, 100% spot on. Few more comments coming in. Can you also use it for finding fake phishing websites? What was that interesting? I believe there would be a patent for that, I imagine.
Whoever this is,
I think it's Rahul, I think.
This is a smart person, because I only see that it's a LinkedIn user, is what I see.
I see it as a LinkedIn user, but I think it's Rahul.
Oh yeah, a very smart guy. So basically, yes, you can. I think he's playing off of the favicon thing.
Oh, yes.
So basically, if someone wants to look like an authentic website, they might use the favicon, obviously, to trick the user. So this would be a way to potentially find that.
Yeah, I think that's him, because he's the one who came up with the love that favicon idea. Can this also be? So that came in, that's from him. For some reason, it's not showing his name, but that's Rahul. I'm glad to know we have some smart people. I mean, I should probably be asking smarter questions, man. Like, I've got a few more people coming in. Now, we spoke about continuous monitoring. We're also talking about something which is really interesting. As an organization which is small to a large, large security team, you can dedicate a lot of resources, be engineering heavy. I'm thinking Netflix and Atlassians of the world with like massive engineering teams. Now, that's not possible for everyone as well, right? So where do you stand the whole using custom code versus can I just find a product to do this? Like, where do you stand on that thinking?
Yeah. So up to a few years ago, I would say you kind of have to write this custom. There are now a number of companies out there that are kind of doing this continuous monitoring stuff. I would say it's getting more useful to potentially look at a vendor for this, but you want to make sure it's not something like, I don't want to say the name, companies that have like scorecards where they're like, we rate your security as a C, and the reason is because we saw your SMTP server didn't use TLS correctly or something. And what they're actually doing is selling those lists, and they're kind of using them as a little bit of extortion. So it's not a really clean space. What you want to know is, okay, you're a vendor that's going to monitor my entire attack surface. What all of my attack surface are you going to monitor, and how quick are you going to monitor it? Because when I was doing this, I was doing it multiple times per hour.
Oh,
This
right.
is near instantaneous. It's near continuous, right? Whereas a lot of the players in the space are like, oh, we do a circulation every month, or we do a circulation every week. And the fact is, it's not fast enough. Ideally, this thing should be continuous.
Yeah.
And we were getting those speeds using what we were doing. So those are the types of questions I would ask these vendors. If you have a strong internal security group, you really don't need to get a vendor. You can just look at the bug bounty space and flip it on its head and turn it into the blue team version. Use the automation that's available, and you could build it yourself. It's just a question of resourcing. If you have a relationship with any of these vendors and you trust them well, it's now to the point where you could do either or, depending on your situation.
I love that idea on flipping the bug bounty program to on its head and using that as your, like, this is what I should build towards because this is what these guys are using.
Mm-hmm.
This is their KO moves. Like 100%, man. Love the idea. With continuous monitoring, and we spoke about just before 11 million logs or 11 million events coming in. I've got this super awesome KO move that, the basically favicon just dies at the end of it. Is there alert fatigue in this space as well? Because I imagine, well, I'm assuming there would not be much alert fatigue because it's all either false positive has been narrowed down. But keen to know your thought, because a lot of the monitoring space or continuous monitoring space talk about the whole, I've got so much alert fatigue, I don't want to see another alert again. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so the way that I set our system up was to only alert on things that are super sensitive. So it's possible to do multi-tiered checks. So let's say there's a Postgres server that's listening. So 5432, it's listening. But the next question, follow-up question is, okay, can you authenticate to it using the top, 100 username and password combinations? I run a project called SecList, which is like the largest collection of usernames and passwords that are for basically everything. And they're kind of the best lists. They're used all over the bug
I'll definitely
bounty
add that in the
community.
show notes, though. But definitely recommend that. Yes.
Yeah. So if you can ask the question of, can I log into this thing? And you find out, yeah, actually the third thing on the list, whatever it is, not even sure the credentials for that service, but let's say it does log in. Well, now the alert that you get is a Postgres server was not just listening on the internet, because that could be a lot of alert fatigue if you have 20 million IP spaces, right? Or a super large, massive org. Because if your SOC is looking at every single Postgres server, it's like, okay, now I have to go manually check. But if you add 1 or 2 levels of check on top of the first one, maybe now you're only getting 3 alerts. And the alerts are, not only did I see it, but I logged in and there's data there. And it also goes back to the ML question of, can the ML be used to reduce that number of alerts? But really, the way to reduce that is to not ask questions that you're worried about alert fatigue for getting the answer to. So, for example, if it's just wide open database ports facing the internet, or certs that are about to expire on your top 10 websites within the next 3 days, that really won't be alert fatigue because you've set the bar so high of criticality. And then as you have more people or more automation to parse and do triage, you could turn the knob of how many more alerts you want to do. But the paradigm that I was using before is do not. So vast majority of the time, no alerts were created whatsoever. This is the opposite of a vulnerability scanner. Vulnerability scanner sends you 100 pages of results no matter when it runs. because it'll send you things like, oh, the secure flag is not set on your website. And just like extremely minor stuff. It's like you're using this framework or whatever. And that'll just fatigue a SOC in a second. But if you only ask very few questions, and you prioritize those, you shouldn't have a problem with alert fatigue.
I love this approach, man. I think, and see, I've been sold on this idea for some time, but for people who are listening to this podcast and going, this sounds interesting, or still on the wall for, oh, should I come onto the continuous monitoring side or not, or let my SOC team continuously just go through manual logs and stuff? What do you tell people? I think you kind of spoke about the methodology and the philosophy as well, but what do you tell people, like, why is it important to be doing continuous monitoring? Is it more to the fact that to be keeping up with the adversaries, or like, what's your thought on, like, why should, like, if in an ideal world, why should everyone should be doing a continuous monitoring?
So the way I would answer that is you need to know the current state of your attack surface at any given moment. And the higher quality of the questions that you're asking of that attack surface, and the more often you're asking them, those two combined result in the best possible current state that you could have. So this would be the equivalent of having eyes constantly on the external perimeter of a castle, right? So let's say you're constantly being bombarded and there might be holes, there might be ladders going over the top because the castle is so large. If you didn't have anyone out there actually watching and actually doing inspection, then people could go in, or they could burrow under, or they can come over the top. Continuous monitoring is the way to know how bad it is at this exact moment.
Yeah, and comparing, I mean, starting to see this pattern already where a lot of us work in a very heavy digital space. It's very unlikely that you would come into a space where, maybe unless you're working in operation technology or something and trying to operate a nuclear plant, if Pentagon's listening, I'm just that may be a different scenario, but most of us, 80 to 90% of us, are still in a very digital space. Digital transformation has been going on for some time. Either most of us are on a cloud environment, or all of us are, thanks to COVID now, remote. So there is no way that you should be kind of shying away from this. Just quickly, there's a comment, I think it's from Rahul again. For some reason, he keeps appearing as LinkedIn user. Natural language processing might be a better way to begin with to understand why someone marks something as a false positive, right? Understanding intent. I know you're exploring the machine learning space, so I'm not sure if you have a comment on that.
I would say there's two different things. One is the decision that they made for the human to market, and the other is the features of the actual service that would determine one way or the other in the algorithm. So I would say it's two separate things, but it's a great idea.
Oh, right. Okay, cool. I'll take that. And the other question that I had towards the end was, because I'm just conscious of the time of your time as well, but I do want to talk about, yes, because you've been in this space for some time, and I'm going to switch gears from technical to non-technical, because I think you've done an amazing job with personal branding. People can go on your website and see the membership and all that. Do you feel like everyone needs to have, and you've had a tweet about this as well. Do you feel everyone in tech or everyone in general should have a personal brand online these days? And what does that really mean for people who are listening to this? I guess that would be a great response, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I would say, I wouldn't want to say everyone. I mean, there's some people who are just like, they're just naturally happy. They don't need to really tell anyone about their thoughts. They don't really need to share anything with anyone else. So there's lots of people in that category, and I wouldn't want to like try to shame them because they're not broadcasting. I would say for anyone who is probably listening to this, and definitely you and me, and thousands and millions of other people like us, if you've ever had the idea of, oh, I should write this down and talk to someone about it, that is the bar. If you've ever had that idea and you wanted to share an idea with anyone,
yep,
you should absolutely have a presence. You should have a website. You should be on Twitter. What social media you use will change because the companies will come and go. and Instagram has a vibe. Twitter has a vibe. They have different vibes, but you should essentially see these different technologies as syndication. You and your perception of the world is a lens. It's a vibe. It's a brand that people can start to like. I mean, like I found you, you found me, and like I like your vibe, so I'm going to subscribe to it, right?
Yep.
Whatever that
Yep.
means, whatever the
That's right.
technology means. And I actually think that this is part of a larger trend where we're moving away from the power of corporations. I think people in the 1950s or whatever, they just wanted to have a cool job at some corporation, and I think things are moving more towards the individual, where what the individual can do as themselves is valuable. They don't need to be tied to a big brand. They could be their own brand. And in order for that to work, in order for people to be able to hear you, you have to establish that platform. And that platform, most importantly, is a central domain. So you want to have a personal domain, and you don't want it to be like I love matchboxcars.com or like I really love whatever Gatorade orange flavor.com, because that might be cool when you're 19, but you need it to scale all the way into your 50s and 60s.
Yeah.
So first name, last name is usually really good, but you want a brand that lasts a long time. And that central domain is the center of everything. And from there you stack on, Twitter and whatever social media that you use.
Yeah.
And most importantly, have ideas, share ideas, and interact with other people who are thinking similarly, or, at a tangent to what you're thinking.
I love that, man. And to your point, I love the fact that some people may look at that as like, oh, I love sharing ideas, but I don't want to be on a video. I don't want to be like, where do I start? Do you have an opinion on everyone should be either doing podcasting, videos, blog? There's so many avenues now. What do you recommend for these people?
So most importantly is a website where you physically write. You write on the website and you have the idea captured. As a thinker or a creator, the most important thing that you do is you capture the idea and you articulate it in some way. So the text form on your website is step one, because you want to get in the habit of, one, creating ideas, and two, capturing them. From there, you can move into, okay, is this audio? Is this video? A lot of people will never move to video. I haven't made a strong move to it yet. And in fact, the videos that I am doing on YouTube, they're actually just, they're slides with narration, similar to some of the math videos that are out there.
Right.
Other people, they're just staring directly at the camera, and maybe that's part of the vibe, because maybe it's about clothes or whatever. So it's different for everyone. But most important is nobody gets onto a video and just wings it, or not many people. They usually come with a plan. They're like, hey, I want to talk to you about this thing. And then they proceed through an agenda, right? Through a 5-minute video or a 30-minute video or whatever it is. You have to be able to capture that and have it written down before you show up on video. So step one is get the domain and start organizing your thoughts on the site.
That's awesome. And it's a good segue into my final segment of just going through any final questions that came through. Oh, hi, Uday. You're there as well. I think the last section of our segment is basically fun questions, nothing technical, just to people get to know you a bit more. Only got 3 questions. So what do you spend most time on when you're not working on technology or continuous monitoring?
Reading.
Ooh, any books or articles, or what's your preference? Or newspaper?
Books.
Books.
And no physical books, all audiobooks, or mostly audiobooks.
Cool. And I think a lot of us are stuck at home, so I guess probably a good time to get back into audiobooks, I guess, play it in the background. The second question, what is something that you're proud of but not on your social media?
That's a great question. I would say, I wonder if there's a distinction between social media versus my site. I try to incorporate every part of my life into my site.
Hmm.
So I don't think that there's ever been a thing that I really care about. I guess my personal relationship with like my partner and my
Yeah.
close friends,
Yeah.
I don't really talk about those too much. Not really for any security reason, just because it doesn't
Yeah, yeah. I
seem.
mean, of course, yeah. And
Yeah,
I think that's a very common theme as well that I've found my previous guests there. Um, Obviously, is some people may do it for security reason, but some is like, well, it's not really important for everyone else to know who my friends are. I guess,
yeah,
like,
yeah.
I'm pretty sure all the celebrities don't really talk about I'm friends with Brad Pitt or whoever. They just like no
Right.
one knows who their friends are.
Yeah.
But no, it's a great answer, man. Final question: what's your favorite cuisine or restaurant that you can share?
Just had a really great experience at this place called Deli Board. It's just a sandwich shop. During COVID, I would say that a lot of very small things have become big, like a good sandwich. We love a place called Akira, which is a sushi restaurant here in San Francisco.
Uh huh.
Um, and in general, we love Korean food. So any
Korean
good,
barbecue?
yeah, Korean barbecue.
Oh,
Yeah,
nice.
yeah, with the pinnacle being so far LA, which we actually enjoyed more than Seoul. Um,
Oh,
just because
wait.
we,
So is this in Koreatown in LA or is
yeah,
this?
Koreatown, yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah, I've heard so much about it. So for anyone who's listening hasn't tried Korean barbecue, 100% recommend Korean barbecue. Get the
Yep.
whole authentic table experience. Wait, did you go to, were they cooking for you or did you cook it yourself?
I believe they were cooking Genwa. I think it was called Genwa.
Genoa. All right, people,
Yeah.
you heard it first in the Koreatown of LA. Sweet. Daniel, I must say, thank you so much for taking the time out. And I'm glad we were able to kind of unveil or peel a few layers from the continuous monitoring and alert fatigue side of things. But I had a really great time. I can't wait to bring you back on again and go to the next level of continuous monitoring and maybe bug bounty as well. Yeah, dude, thanks so much for coming in. For people who have further questions, where can they reach you? What's your socials?
Yeah, it's just Daniel Miesler. It's danielmiesler.com for the website and Daniel Miesler on Twitter.
Awesome. Dude, thank you so much again. And I can't wait to have come you back